Hello, Internet. Third take. I'm trying to say this punchy and I keep getting longer for some reason. So, anyways, I just got back from Denver Comic Con and I wanted to make a video, and I realize it's been forever since I made a video. The reason for that is my comic book talking time has been kind of monopolized. I'm part of two podcasts now. The first one is with Damien, Sleep Reader 666. I know you guys are familiar. We're famous friends. And it's been really fun. We're doing a show called Never Say Dead. What it is every episode we alternate and we get to kind of pick a story and throw it and have the other one read it, and we, talk it through, have some fun, discuss it out, ramble on past it. And it's been a fun exercise, and if you love my weird rambly stuff here, I imagine you like that podcast. The other benefit, too, is I've been finding more utility in comic book podcasts, more so than some of the YouTube lately, just because the form's easier. You throw on the headphones, it's while you're driving, it's while you're doing cardio or whatever. Just seems to work a little easier for me now, where I'm at in life. And if it's not for you, I understand. But you could throw up like anything else and not really watch it, because I can't imagine you watch many of my videos as it's basically just this beautiful mug talking to you. And once you get the image in your head, it's basically all the same. Anyways, the other podcast I'm doing is eating up infinitely more of my time. And it is the Untold Talks of Spider-Man. I'm working with this guy, Kane Winstead, passionate Spider-Man about as much as I am, if not more. But I think I'm definitely the better half of the podcast. I mean, same with the Damien one, am I right? Anyways, that's not fair. Both of those podcasts, I'm putting in about 40% of the effort, and the other guy's putting in about 60 for whichever one. And I am trying to keep up. It's just been a lot going on. But the Untold Talks of Spider-Man is great. We're trying to dive into the lesser discussed Spider-Man stories. Sometimes I push for stuff that isn't that untold, but it's been fun so far. We've covered a lot, like the Marvel Knights Mark Millar Spider-Man. We covered Trouble. That was weird. And recently we did an interview with J.M. DeMatteis about The Child Within, which is a very well forgotten Spider-Man story. It's a great follow-up to Kraven's Last Hunt, which is definitely one of the bigger Spider-Man stories. And The Child Within has never been recollected, reprinted, anything, except like in Europe, apparently. And it's a shame. I think it's a great story. We talked to the author about it, and that was a highlight of my talking about comics career. All that money I'm making. Anyways, I'm making this video today to talk to you about Denver Comic Con. I just wanted to highlight some of the things I picked up, signatures in particular, and talk to you a bit about some of the panels I was on, because I found some cool comic book trivia along the way, and I thought I'd share it all with you. So I hope you'll stay tuned, but at the very least I want to put those announcements up first, so if you guys were curious in any of the podcast stuff, you could hear that out. So first, what makes sense to me is to show you the signatures I got, because that was more of a highlight for this show than it has been for many in past shows for me. So many great talents of people I was actually really curious to hear some nugget from. The first one is Mike Zeck, Soul the Hunter. As you can imagine, I was kind of curious to hear his take on Soul the Hunter in light of talking to J.M. DeMatteis. We were talking about The Child Within. This book came up before. This is actually the first book we covered on Untold. So it has a little special place in my heart now, beyond the fact that it's just a fun oddity to talk about. If you don't know, this is a direct follow-up to Kraven's Last Hunt. It was written somewhat in response to the fact that after Kraven's Last Hunt, all these parents mostly wrote in to say that they were somewhat concerned about how suicide was depicted and the fact that Kraven kind of got his win by offing himself. And it wasn't like a PR thing. It was that JM felt that they had a point and that there needed to be something there. And also, there was something more to explore. And it was funny, Mike Zeck got pulled onto the project and he said he felt it was completely unnecessary, but he was kind of happy to do it. And it was an interesting kind of book, but far from, his favorite work or anything. I could tell I was one of the few people that ever brought this up to him because he was a little taken aback. He's used to citing more of his Punisher stuff, or obviously Kraven's Last Hunt itself. It was kind of funny to me, though. He asked, well, you've read Kraven's Last Hunt, right? I was kind of like, how do you think I got here without being there first? But whatever it was kind of cool to hear it from his side that, yeah, it was interesting, but it was kind of unnecessary and definitely bizarre, which I think lines up with pretty much everyone's opinion of that book. I know even JM, who, felt it was necessary, kind of looks at it and I was kind of like, I don't think it's anyone's favorite offering, but it sure is an interesting thing. You totally understand where they're coming from when you read it. It's well handled, but it is a hard thing to nail. Next up is I got Greg Capullo to sign my Batman #1. Cool guy as always. I definitely saw him in a couple panels, and he's definitely a personality in the room. And it was great to be able to shake his hand. I'll probably talk a little more about him later, but nothing wrong with Batman #1 getting signed either, right? Alright. Another cool one, Batman-wise, was I got this Batman Robin 38 signed by Tomasi. I picked this one because when we as a community were going through books, the community is what really pulled me to Batman Robin. I really didn't think much of it at first, and I kept hearing, man, this is the best Bat book. Man, this is one of the best things DC is putting out. And so I kept coming back to it, and I remember hearing about this story coming and thinking, this sounds like such a crock. And then I read it, and you couldn't help but love it, and love the fact that, yeah, this was a fun little moment in comics. It was only ever meant to be temporary, but it was supposed to be fun, and it was. And this moment, when I think about this entire run, this moment is the one that shines brightest, because I remember everyone just kind of taking a kind of glee to this issue in particular. And so I just thought, if I'm going to have him sign one, it's going to be that one. Next up is I actually got 3 books signed. Christopher Priest was there, and he's one of my all-time favorite authors, and I was trying to talk to him a little bit, and so I had him sign 3 comics. Each one from probably the 3 most notable parts. Maybe not the 3 most notable, but some of the more notable parts of his career. First was Quantum Woody. Got him to sign that. That seemed appropriate. And then I got him to sign my favorite issue of his Black Panther run. The reason I like this bit with the Killmonger was it showed that their fight wasn't just this normal comic book struggle. There was this economic thing. There was this social stature thing in a weird way. And it was just, it blew my mind when I read it. And to me, when I think about Black Panther and where that was, the hero's only as good as his villain, and Killmonger and Black Panther there, to me, that's just one of those classic struggles now. And I totally get where they picked Killmonger for the movie and all that. In my mind, the movie didn't live up to this, but the fact that it even came close made it one of the best, adaptations that could have been. And the other was I got him to sign my favorite issue from his Deadpool run, because of course I did. And it was funny, this was the issue that when he saw it, he just took off and started talking. He's like, man, when I got Deadpool, I didn't know what to do, but then he's talking about comparing it to Seinfeld and all this other stuff, and it was just great. And I told him, I was so happy when he was announced, because in my mind, he was definitely one of the stars of the show and whatnot. And he said it to me, but he also said in a panel later, people just don't really know who he is. He feels still kind of like he's up and coming or whatever. And that's part of the reason he left, was after having a fairly prestigious career and whatnot. He, in particular, he was doing this new book for DC called The Crew. It only got so many issues out. but the book was canceled before the first issue even hit the stands. And when that happened, it really just shook his confidence and his ability to carry forward. This is crazy. This is someone who has sat down in the office with Stan Lee to kind of learn how to come up through comics. This is someone who, did editing, did writing, had his hands on tons of classic characters, and made his mark with a number of them as well. And wasn't happy to be resigned to be the black author. He wanted to be the good comic writer. He wanted to be known for telling good stories first. And so he purposely took assignments that were not, and fought for ones that weren't black characters, because he just wanted to be known, as a person writing good comics. And it's kind of interesting to see now. There's definitely some more people who are recognizing him and whatnot, but given his career and his trajectory, it's kind of amazing that he hasn't made it further. So, I don't know, hopefully my admiration was one drop into the pool further to help him carry on. I just hope he keeps making great stuff, because he's immensely talented. And in a lot of ways, I think he was doing some of what Matt Fraction was doing before. Matt Fraction was so well known for it. He doesn't approach every book with a new tack, but he approaches most books with a new tack and is willing to take in similar tacks for books where it's going to work. And so I think it's just kind of a shame that doesn't get noticed as much, because he definitely has some style and flair that makes him a more notable writer. Like, you can usually tell a Christopher Priest comic just by reading without looking at the title on the cover, but not always. I don't know. Anyways, beyond that, I got Brian Azzarello to sign my Wonder Woman #1, and I told him the story about when it was Phil Jimenez was coming up around this run to Denver, and was saying, like, this run for Wonder Woman is for people who don't like Wonder Woman. And Azzarello just laughed. He's like, he said that? Apparently they get along fine. They talk. They're good. From my impression up until the moment I talked to Azzarello about this was that they did not like each other based on that. But Azzarello just said, you know what, he's a Wonder Woman purist, and I definitely had a different take on the character, but, people seem to have enjoyed it. It's not for everyone, nothing is, but whatever. And he just seemed super chill with it, but he did seem a little taken aback by the fact that I heard that, so I was happy to have that reconciled. It made me realize, these are people that have opinions about the characters, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean they hate each other necessarily. So it's just an interesting take, especially dear Azzarello come from it. I was expecting Azzarello to be a little more surly, and he's just a nice guy. It's just that a lot of the stuff he views as his job, so once that 9 to 5's done, or however he views his working hours, he doesn't really continue with it, and he puts it down. So he has this very big line of separation. I don't know quite where that's drawn or how that affects everything, but you could tell that was a big factor with that. Then the creme de la creme for me, the biggest thing, the reason I was stoked to go to this con this year was I got to meet Kevin Eastman. I got this first printing of Turtles signed because I wanted something early, obviously, early Turtles, and something that meant something to me that every time I pick it up, I was going to say, oh, man, I got this signed by Eastman. I was able to, do that. This just felt like the right book. This is my favorite coloring of the early issues. And then I got him to sign the 2012 annual. The reason I selected this one was because, obviously, the cover, he does a cover for all the new Turtles, which is impressive in its own right, sure. But he did the entire interiors for this. He had helps with layout and stuff, but this was his book, more so than the rest of the run, which is, all more done by Waltz. I know Waltz helped on this issue, but I feel like you could tell there was more Eastman flair and love than a lot of the other issues. Not to say that you can't see it in others, but there's something about this one that was uniquely Eastman. And so I wanted that. I was kind of hoping, and I was searching for something Eastman had done that wasn't Turtles. I actually found it at the con after I could have possibly gotten a signature, which was a bummer, but I didn't care. I picked it up. There's this Ronan Bebop with Simon Baisley, who's talking about, who did the body count one that was Raph and Casey in this giant gunfight thing, uber violent, whatever. That's getting reprinted this year, apparently. And then Eric Tablet, did I say that right? Talbot of Turtles lore fame, who's done tons of Turtles work, just a lot of the stuff that gets glazed over. And then Tom Scullin, who I know nothing about, but I couldn't, see this and pass it on, so I'll be curious to go through this later. Anyways, meeting Eastman was the best for me. I was able to come up. I waited fucking 90 minutes, but which I would have done for anyone else. I got up there and you had to pay. First signature was free. You had to pay for the second. After waiting that long, I was getting my 2 signatures, and. He was citing, who can I make this out to, yada yada, and I just said, man, I love Turtles. It's one of my favorites and all that, but I want to say I'm a huge fan of yours, not only for keeping this going and doing all this work, but for what you do with heavy metal, what you've done with independent creators throughout the years. There's no person on this world, I think, that cares more about comic books. Not to say that there aren't some on your level, but you're more than just one of my favorite creators. You're my favorite advocate for the medium. And in the course of saying this in a slightly different way, because I was gushing and rambling a little, nervous, he shook my hand 3 times, basically. And it was just one of those, little awkward, but I could tell it was a genuine response. And he seemed to have a genuine response with everyone. I was just trying to do something a little different, and it's just funny to me because whenever he talks about stuff, he is talking about Turtles all the way through. He did push a new Kickstarter he's doing with can't remember his name off the top of my head, but a new project they're doing. They wanted to promote that because it's still being funded, it sounded like, or was just funded. But Turtles was his thing, and he knows that that's what people want to hear about, whatever. But I did want to hear more about where he came in with heavy metal, with where he influenced other creators and how he helped with that. It was just something else for me. So, yeah, those were the signatures I got, and I felt kind of silly. I brought a Frank Miller one to get signed because he was technically there, but that would have cost a lot of money, and so I didn't do that, and a lot of time. And then Freddie Williams was there, and the team who did Batman TMNT was there. James Tinian IV, that was the writer that I couldn't place a moment ago. Both of them were there, and I forgot to bring something for them to sign, so I felt silly. Also, Andy Kuhn was there, who's been doing the recent Spectacular Spider-Man. I didn't bring anything for him to get signed either, but I'm less worried about that one. Yeah. So those were the signatures and a little bit more of what's going on. I'll show you some other stuff I got, and then I'll talk panels, but that's going to be the longest part, so I'll save that for last. So, I already put some stuff away, but I picked up some tail end of Walking Dead that I didn't get, the latest Hellblazer that came out. Nothing too exciting. I picked up this Reborn #1 for a little over cover price because it was already signed by Capullo. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to going through that. That was one I meant to get. Then, here we go. Ben Bishop, who's the guy who's running with Kevin Eastman, put out this, it's a Choose Your Own Adventure comic. He handed off a little intro, and there's apparently some to be continueds in here that's going to be followed up in a part 2. And I'm really curious to go through this. This is something different, but by someone with immense talent. And I'm really curious to go through. That's just something cool, right? And then, let's see here. Martinez has this Hume and Forever book. I just picked up the first issue because it looked interesting, but I wasn't sure it was my jam, so I thought I'd pick up one issue, and then if I like it, I'll grab some more. But yeah, I know this is published by Kerblame though, so I mean this is her effort. I want to look more into her work because it sounds like she's been doing a lot of work, but not necessarily getting credit for all of it. And that's something I'm realizing more and more at Marvel is some of these big names have people working under them that don't get credit. I'm guessing that happens at DC too. Yeah, the comics industry, the more you look into it, there's more onions to unpeel. And people stay in it obviously for the love, but you kind of wish it was more upfront because I think more problems are caused by the confusion than are solved by it, though maybe it equals some short-term sales, so maybe that's the upswing. I'm gonna have to crack this open. Okay, I'm gonna butcher this. Ashna Sana Anwar was this Muslim creator there who took it upon herself to kind of do a modernized 101 Arabian Nights, just called 101. I've started this. I haven't actually gotten to crack through it yet, though, but it is gorgeous. She's an immense artistic talent, and I can tell if she was given a few more resources and, a little bit of a contract. It's something you can see with these more independent artists when they're given, enough luxury to know that they can eat for the next few months or something. Their art suddenly gets better when they don't have, life dragging them down. But despite everything, she's doing amazing work. Her covers are just... the covers on these are gorgeous. Wow, there's the camera. Yeah, something else. If you haven't and you're looking for something a little more independent, I'd look into maybe trying to pick some of these up. She deserves the shout out. There's some amazing stuff. No, so indie. I got a copy of Oblivion Song when I bought some Walking Dead. I'll take a free comic. And then I actually got to catch up with my friend Melanie Gilliam. Picked up Pockets, a little mini comic she did. But the big thing here that I would point to you, I've read most of this already, As the Crow Flies, is this, smaller take on this girl who goes to camp who's struggling with her identity, LGBTQ kind of stuff. And it's... this is an award-winning book. This is one of those, slower, more human, but great tales. And she has this style. I don't know how to describe Melanie's style, which is crazy because I've seen her do this. She just brings out colored pencils and texture in a way that I see few people do, and it is time consuming compared to the way a lot of people go about coloring, putting in texture in their book, but there's something capturing about it that makes you linger in a way that some other comic art doesn't. And so for all that, I think if you're looking for maybe a slower, more human story, more potential of what comics can be, definitely check this out. I'm not the only one recommending this to you. This is an Ignatz Award winner, an Eisner winner, an Otto Stradl Comics and Sequential Art Award. Never even heard of that one. And a Slate Book Review. Oh, prize winner. Yeah. So, yeah, if you can name a comic more prestigious than that, we should definitely both read that as well. So, I don't know. There you go. Okay, now I just want to talk panels. This is going to get rambly, so strap in. The first panel I attended was Comics with the Cultural Conscious. There was Gene Ha, who's done all kinds of amazing art. He actually looked at my wife and sketched her and then handed her the sketch and then just started doing it for other people in the audience. I'm guessing that's how he does panels, but it was something else. It was really cool. Sandy Arwar from that 1001 that I showed you was there. Amy Chu, who's done a lot of Red Sonja and a bunch of other incredible work, was there. Tony Medea, who is this professor and did this I Am Alfonso book that I'm not super familiar with, but it sounds like it's been making the rounds, were there, and they were just kind of talking about socially conscious comics. It was an interesting panel to hear, and kind of was that recognition of importance and diversity in books, and also just how it affects the art, how it affects the perspective, and how they can come in and bring something new to these characters. And it was really invigorating, really interesting, but it also introduced me to some incredible creators that I hadn't really paid much attention to, and got me to check out some of their work. So that was my main takeaway, which maybe was lighter than what some other people were getting out of it. I just, while they were trying to talk about the socially conscious aspect, you could also tell it was kind of this big thing that a lot of them were like, I don't want to necessarily have that all put on me. You know, I'm trying my best. With certain books, I can push this. With certain books, I cannot. Sometimes it's important for me to not be the one always pushing that book and just have me be the Asian American or whatever it is creator that is doing just kind of the regular thing. And that alone, in a way, is more of a statement sometimes than diving into it heavy-handedly all the time. It was just this interesting balance where, you know, they recognize the need, but they're also just creators trying to make it too. And comics are a very limited industry. So it was interesting to hear them talk about that push and pull. The next panel I made it to the next day was Kevin Eastman's panel. Not his highlight, but talking about Turtles more where it was now. This was kind of an IDW showcase. They had the editor running it, and they spent a little too long on the Batman Turtles crossover bit, partially because both creators were there, and they wanted to show it also to most other people in the audience. I imagine that's more of a draw in, you know, Batman and Turtles, ooh. Whereas here I am wanting, like, let's talk Turtles, you know. It's kind of heartbreaking, you know. They bring in Kevin Eastman and they're talking Turtles, and people's familiarity with the comics and some of the other things going on was very limited. Now, maybe I'm approaching this the wrong way, but the fact that they're announcing Rise of the Turtles and half the audience is like, oh, they're doing a new... Oh, they canceled the one that was going on. I had no idea. And I don't know, to me, it's like, yeah, where have you been? And talking about the current run, like, oh, we're dealing with this issue recently, and we're dealing with this Rat King and the Pantheon, and explaining that all to me. And I'm like, who doesn't know that? We're in this room, right? And so... It was interesting to hear. It was quite the panel. I mean, Eastman, obviously, Tinian, Freddie Williams. Ben Bishop was there. He seems to be kind of Eastman's go-to guy right now, and they're doing some stuff together. They apparently have a big connection because they both came up through Maine. So, there you go. Andy Kuhn was there talking about his stuff. He's my least favorite Turtles artist right now, so we'll see. And Craig Rousseau was someone who did some issues who happened to be there too, it felt like, but he was on. And it was just kind of cool, and also kind of showcased that, I mean, whereas, you know, in the Mirage days, when they brought in other creators, they're like, do what you want, you're artists, you know, do something different with the Turtles. That spirit's been carried through in IDW, and whereas it may not be as freeform as it was, and where they could do literally anything and did, some of that early Mirage stuff is out there. Now there's some scripting and there's some things they need to follow because they're building this larger story, but I mean, artistically, it's been pretty all over the map, and they've brought in and raised the profile of a number of talented artists and haven't been afraid to strike out and really do something different, just for the sake of doing it different sometimes, which has been really fun. I mean, we see lots of cool styles with the micro series stuff, with the Bebop Rocksteady team that just draws carnage happening all over. It's really kind of invigorating, kind of realizing that and seeing these people talk about Turtles, and even people who didn't like Turtles growing up coming on and being an artist to this, kind of brings them into this little brotherhood of creators. And it was kind of a shame for me, because the one who I was hoping was there was Sophie Campbell, and with me going to a lot of these diversity in comics sorts of panels and whatnot, I kind of felt the like, oh, they're all white guys. They're so, and I'm like, I know at least there's Sophie Campbell, who's transsexual, who's, you know, maybe snuck in, you know, white guy and then not. But that whole dynamic is still kind of like, I'm like, it had to be pretty innocent though, because you can tell they're trying to bring in diversity, but diversity by creation and not diversity by creator first. And so, I don't know. It's hard for me to dissuade my love of Turtles with something like that, but something I was conscious of sitting in that room. The next panel I went to was bizarre as far as panels went. It was Batman and comics, which I want to point out, at DCC they had this under area where they had a handful of the more comic oriented panels going, and the rooms were called like Gotham, Coast City, Happy Harbor, and they put the Batman panel in Coast City when Gotham was right there. That's weird, right? Anyways, the creators on this panel were Greg Capullo, Brian Azzarello, James Tynion IV, Tom King, and David Finch. And it was funny, Greg Capullo showed up like 10 minutes late. Apparently there's some confusion going on. But there was no moderator, and so they were just kind of taking questions and going with it. And then halfway through, this moderator strolls up and he's like, hey, I'm here to help out. Greg Capullo looked right at him and was like, we don't need you. But the guy persisted anyways, and the panel went down the minute this guy came on, because every other question he interjected his own, and it was just like, dude, no. But they were talking a bit about the process and a bit about what goes through with it being Batman. And it's interesting because every one of them kind of has a different take. They're mostly just kind of riffing off of each other and having fun. It was interesting seeing Tom King up there and talking about it, because Damien and I have gone back and forth, in my case very negatively, about a lot of his recent Bat run. And the way he's up there talking about it is, it seems like he's more of a comic book historian, and he really wants to take these interesting little niche pieces of Batman lore and blow them up to some prominence, just because he loves all these little things and he wants to make them big. And hearing him talk about it, I was just like, it doesn't sound like you have much to say or do. You just want to kind of be the fact guy and bring it to light, which is a weird place to come from a writer, which, I don't know. But Greg Capullo was talking about, he has all these thoughts and opinions about Batman, but it's interesting because some of them seem askew from his actual work, because, you know, he doesn't get to write it. So that's interesting. The more you hear from him, the more it sounds like, you know, Spawn was his home base, and that was probably a very good fit for him. And maybe returning to a book more like that might allow him to really dive into what he wants to do. Though Batman had its moments. Azzarello barely wanted to talk. Yeah. And I don't know, James Tynion there was the guy who was agreeing with the most, talking about Tim, the importance of a lot of the lore, bringing in interesting aspects to Gotham. He seemed to have a lot of reverence for Barbara Gordon. And I thought that was interesting. Kind of brought her up in a few different ways, and I thought, you know, this guy should be writing Barbara, because he apparently has a view of the character that would make her stronger and more prominent within the mythos in a way that I don't think any other creator could tackle because they're not thinking about her in this way. So, I don't know what that's worth, but it was there. And then the big one for me, Sunday, was the Black Panther panel. There's supposed to be a few people there, but it was really just Christopher Priest and Althea Martinez. I'm probably mispronouncing, but Martinez was an artist, and she seems like a really talented artist. But there's a lot about Black Panther, and there was, you know, a lot of people of color in the room, and one guy in particular was there who was dressed up as Black Lightning, making a big point about Father's Day and how he's the ultimate Father's Day character because of the way the character is portrayed on the show, and he went through all that. I'm sure if you've seen the show, it makes sense. I haven't seen it yet, and I got what he was putting down, but I don't want to run through it necessarily. And he was looking at these two creators saying, like, I want you to know what you've done. You may not think about yourselves this way, but you're heroes. You inspire with what you've done. And I've never gotten to see many people who look like me in a book or on screen or any of that. And your presence and what you put down laid the work for all of these different things in the way that matters. And I just wanted, and it was this whole thing, and it was just this energy in the room where I usually try to make sure to ask one question every panel whenever I get the chance, because I feel like I try to ask something that isn't, what's your favorite, or how do you get started in comics, which happens everywhere no matter where you go, and I just want some more intelligent questions to be out there. But this was one time where I was just like, I'm just going to shut up and see what happens. And yeah, Martinez talked about her art with Wakanda, and was talking about initially T'Challa had these bodyguards. The way she was drawing them, she's like, the hoes, you know, like mini skirts and this whole thing. And she's like, that's not, no. But when she was asked to kind of redraw them and do it in a different way, she was using different body shapes. She was doing completely different clothing that would actually allow them to kick without it being a superpower for them to not, you know, rip it while stuff was happening. Do some things, you know, that wasn't just the way comics were done in the early 2000s in general. And it was interesting to hear that perspective. It was also really fascinating to hear Christopher Priest talk about Black Panther and how he's kind of pulled onto it. And when he said he was going to do it, he said, only do it if I get to do it my way. Was talking about, you know, kind of this badass character, but like representing things in a certain way. And not like representation, but it's like, you know, let's go to Wakanda and let's make it cool and not this kind of humdrum place that it's become through the last several years. And he really wanted to do something special with the character, which at the time, initially, he got a lot of hate for. You know, this isn't my Black Panther. Oh, you're making him too invincible. Oh, you're making him too powerful or something. How can you do that? And now, you know, his is considered pretty much one of the definitive runs on the character. And it really did kind of shift the character into the direction it went that's been taken forward. And I don't know, it was something kind of powerful, and it kind of showed what that meant to people. And it was one of those sitting in that room, you know, like people being like, yeah, and then we got to see Black Panther on the screen. And even these two creators, when they were talking about Black Panther, Christopher Priest was telling the story because he got invited to the premiere, as he rightfully should have. And he was looking through when Wakanda was first being kind of unveiled on screen. And, you know, the white people are going on, you know, they're at a cool movie. He's like, yeah, they're enjoying it, all good. But the black people in the audience, you know, they're holding back tears. They're feeling something else. And this isn't the first time I've heard this story about that movie or about other powerful moments of, you know, be a representation for people who haven't really had it, and just the importance of it for people who don't have it just can't resonate with people who have, because it's their everyday. And I don't know. It's something I'm still trying to churn through, but I feel like, the lessons in those words, but how that's going to impact, how do you carry that forward for other people, especially as someone who's just a fan, not a creator. What can you do? What can you say? But I think that's important to carry forward. And remember, when we're talking about stuff and saying things like, oh, I didn't like this character, oh, why did they have to take this white character and push them another way, and realize, that fight for representation is a real fight for some people, and whereas it may ruin a character for a few people because, oh man, it isn't the way it was, but it's some maligned character anyways, like, say, the Atom. For a new generation, new chunk of people coming in, that is their Atom, and if it's able to do more than where it was before, let it happen. That was something else. That whole talk. Anyways, the panel I went to after that was a Kevin Eastman spotlight, where he kind of went through his career with the Turtles, talking about stuff. I have to be honest, it was a lot of review for me. I already knew most of this. I've read so much about him and his career. I don't think there's honestly a lot I could have said or heard that would have been new to me, but hearing it come directly from his mouth and him laying out different things was fun nonetheless. But I don't know if there's any huge takeaways there, other than, this is a guy who loves what he does. He's always been humble. He's always been looking to do more for the medium, and a lot of that shone through as he was talking through all this, even though he was skipping major chunks of his career. He was really just highlighting Turtles for people in this one new project because Ben was with him, and I don't know. I think he could have done a better job of propping himself up. He was more impressive than he made himself out to be, and it wouldn't have been anything braggadocious to say, oh yeah, no, I helped with heavy metal, and it's this big thing for all these creators, and I bought in and made myself editorial to help push this thing forward. It helped inspire me, and I hope it continues to help inspire. It was about what he could have said, and I know he said something similar about it too when he's talked about it before, and he just didn't even touch that, which is crazy to me. That's huge. What he did talk about, though, which was interesting, is he actually didn't really talk much about Frank Miller's as far as influence. He talked infinitely more about Jack Kirby being an influence at 2 points, with his art early on and his influences, loving Commandy growing up in particular, and that one of his life highlights was being a fan at a con and getting his stuff signed by Kirby. Pretty endearing, and hopefully that makes people like, say, Damien a little more interested. Yeah. Then the last panel I went to should be a warning for other panels. Dear Lord. Luckily, so I should start off. This was supposed to be an X-Men panel. Didn't really turn out that way. It was supposed to be moderated by this guy called the Comic Historian, who's here on YouTube. Thank God it wasn't. That guy bugs me. Mostly because he just talks through comic stories that you should go read. So, if you like comics, just frickin' read them? I don't know. Anyways, they brought two people on, Greg Capullo and Andy Kubert. And Greg Capullo starts off with, like, I've never done X-Men. I did X-Force. And that was over 10 years ago, so I don't remember everything. And then Andy Kubert was like, yeah, I did some X-Men stuff, but it's been a while. And I don't know. And so it really just evolved into kind of a comic artist talk, which was interesting to have a more focused panel, because a lot of the panels throughout have been bigger at this con. And Capullo and Kubert were like very different personalities, very different backgrounds as far as being artists. And hearing two people agreeing so much about what comic art should be was fascinating. Capullo's kind of more self-taught, just kind of came up, just did it. Discipline, hard work, do it the hard way every time, and do it every day was kind of his thing. And Kubert, lineage, all about art school, helps with an art school and pushing all that. But saying it's not necessarily necessary, but most people gain a lot and gain more faster through expertise, through critique, through the process of an art school thing. So it was just that interesting. The other thing too is Capullo is just this personality. He's not trying to be a good guy. I don't know how to place his personality, but I've seen it other times before. Bigger guy, big laugh. Not saying he's the good guy. He admitted to stealing this art book that he couldn't find anywhere, but he found it at his library, so he still has it. A little mischievous, a little push it, and talking about Snyder kind of like a snivelly guy. And like for one of the Batman stories saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, Greg, I'm taking you to a dark place," and he's just laughing like, I came up on Spawn, like this is my home base. And yeah. And Kubert talking about all these different things, talking a bit about Spider-Man and some of the scripts Zdarsky was throwing at him, and being like, Chip, you're an artist too, come on. Because apparently Chip was falling into some of the pitfalls that a lot of comic artists fall into when they're passing things off to the artists that aren't as ideal as normal. So, I don't know. It was a fascinating thing to sit through, but I heard nothing really about X-Men whatsoever. And I don't know who put that panel together, but they did not do their job. But it ended up being interesting nonetheless, just because of the sheer talent and history in that room. Which was a heck of a way to end kind of that part of the show. And yeah, it was interesting. I tried to approach it lighter, have more fun, and, go do more of what my wife wanted to do. So I saw a couple celebrity panels or whatever, and did more drinking with friends. But yeah, good times. I hope any of this was useful for any of you, and I hope to see y'all soon with another comic review. And please check out more of the podcasts. Look forward to hearing from you. Peace.